We're so happy that you're joining us today. I'm your co-host, Jacob, and I have with me.
I am Barney.
And our topic today is something near and dear to our hearts. It's the naming of our children and the significance that their names have for us, how we came to find their names. And we're really excited to share this with you because naming is a unique responsibility and opportunity that parents have. And it's something that everybody seems to have a story related to. So we're excited to share that with you today. Maybe as a side topic, this can lead you to reflect on your own name, or if you have children, your own naming of them. And even maybe perhaps stories that your parents told you about how they selected your name. So it's a very rich topic, and we're grateful to have you with us. So now I'll turn it over to you, Barney. Maybe if you would get started just on your own journey with arriving at the names for your children.
Yeah, I like telling this story, and everyone that I've told this story to, they tell me that maybe my version or the things that I went through is maybe kind of unique. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but maybe at the end of the story, you'll help me decide. I clearly remember sitting at the table after supper, talking with Ayako about what kind of names we wanted for our upcoming son. We wanted it to be a surprise for us, but with technology these days, there was that you couldn't deny that we were having a boy. And even though they didn't tell us, but anyway, so the neat thing about naming names in Japan is probably China as well, is you get to have a kanji, right? The Chinese characters. So those characters have a meaning, plus the way that the name is pronounced has a meaning. And a long time ago, I had a student, and his name was Toa, and the To was winter, and the Wa was song. And I thought, man, that's just so beautiful. Winter song. When you see that, you can just have a really great image of what that means. And our first son was due to be born in May, but I took a shot at it anyway. And I said, how about the name Toma, winter and horse? Because I could see just this white stallion, in the snow, and just making this beautiful romantic image. And of course, she said, well, Toma is very good, but he'll be born in May, so maybe we shouldn't use winter. And I said, well, okay, I tried. And right. And so we decided on Toma, and we wanted to give him a middle name, which is it's common, and it's possible. It's possible, but it's not very common. I have seen a few students with middle names. And in Japan, because of the name registration process, you don't have a middle name. It's one long first name. And we decided on Christoph very easily. So Toma Christoph, that's very nice. And then so we decided on Toma, and a few months later, he was born. And then Ayako's dad said, I don't really want you to name him Toma, because also in kind of unique to Japanese, usually people, especially kids, they shorten their name and they add the chan or the kun. So usually chan is for girls and then kun is for boys. So with my own wife's example, right, her name is Ayako, and then she would have been called Aya and then Chan, so Aya Chan. But with little kids, they can be Chan or Kun. It doesn't really matter, just because they're so cute. So Ayako's dad said, if we call him Toma, then I'll call him To-chan. And To-chan is kind of what somebody might call their own dad, like daddy. Because father is Otosan. And then to shorten that, it would be To-chan. So he said,
calling his grandson father or
Yeah,
daddy.
right. Yeah, right. It's
I
really
see the
involved.
dilemma. Yeah, that's
Yes, exactly, exactly. So I'm thinking, well, I was planning on calling him Tomakun. Wouldn't that be okay? But so then we had to cancel. We had to get rid of Toma, and then the long process started again of the baby books and finding different names. And then we found Yuma. And one problem is Ayako's mom, she said, how about this kanji for you? And it's hard to describe, but the best way I can describe it is it's a little messy. It has like kind of three distinct parts, and the bottom is, it's nice. The bottom is heart, but the way that heart is written, it's kind of, you can tell it's kind of three separate parts. So it doesn't have a good cohesiveness to it. And much more importantly, I had a student named Yudo, and I don't think will ever listen to this podcast, so I think it's okay to say this. He was a very naughty student. And of course, his U was the same one that she suggested. He's a very naughty student. And I remember it was a Sunday. We were in Ayako's room. In Japan, you actually stay in the hospital for 5 days for a natural birth, and 1 week for a C-section. So before church, I was looking in her room, looking at a book, and I found a kanji for you, and it said helped by God, and it looked very nice, and I thought that's a very good plus, and we suggested it to Ayako's family, and her mom said, isn't this kind of an old style name? I have friends that have this name, this kanji. Don't you think it's a little bit old? And I had to do my best thinking on my feet. And I said, oh, well, actually, I know a teacher, and she's young, and she has this kanji. And then she decided that would be okay in that aspect. But then she said, because I explained that Christoph means like to bear Christ. And then she said, well, if you means helped by God and Christoph means to bear Christ, aren't they going to end up fighting? Because of the Japanese idea that, in Shintoism, there are 8 million gods. And her thinking of helped by God was small g God. And then I explained, oh, no, there's nothing to worry about because, big G God and Jesus, it's actually the same. So we don't have to worry about anything. And then the ma, we didn't use horse. We used truth. So kind of helped by God, or God is helping, and then truth. And then Christoph is finally the name that we were able to come up with. And when I tell this story to other people, they said, we never had so much feedback from our family. In fact, our family didn't give us any input at all. They just waited until we made the announcement, and then they said, oh yeah, what a great, lovely name. So maybe more feedback maybe leads to a better name. I don't know. Or maybe more feedback makes it harder to find a name. Either way, but of course, we're very happy with Yuma.
Well, it's so interesting, Barney, because this episode is kind of coming after 2 episodes ago, our discussion of weddings and marriage. And that to me seems a lot like an issue of family culture, emerging out of family culture. Certain families might have a more involvement or a tradition around naming that involves the parents or even grandparents. And you can even hear it sometimes when people will give names to their children to honor other relatives too. It seems there's maybe a little bit greater emphasis or importance placed on that. That's fascinating. Yeah. I'm trying to think that story is probably the greatest example I've heard of of that approach, because I'm
Yeah.
trying to think if I have any other stories where I've heard as much feedback and development and in the process. And it's interesting, but kudos to you for being so flexible
Uh-huh.
and navigating it well. It sounds like you were able to go through the process and it was meaningful, and you included everybody and still arrived
Mm-hmm.
at a name that you enjoy. And that's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it really did work out because there aren't so many good kanji for to. Um, the one that I wanted, but actually I was kind of on my own in wanting this, was to climb, can be read as to. And so I thought climbing toward the truth, I thought that was also very good.
Oh,
Kind of
yes.
like it's the same one for climbing a mountain.
Ah.
But no one else wanted that one. They wanted a very, very simple kanji that actually doesn't have a meaning to it.
Oh,
Like some kanjis are kind of just like placeholders.
okay. Ah,
Or
interesting.
yeah. And so I guess in the end, it ended up working out. Yeah.
That's good. Yes. Well, and it's like another connector, our earlier episode on
Mm-hmm.
weddings. It's like a journey of discovery and perhaps even negotiation sometimes when you're making decisions. Like um, in that case, we were talking about planning weddings and including people and what happens after the wedding. It kind of navigating what emerges, and when it is something that you enjoy and others enjoy, it's a win-win. And so
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like you were able to do that really well and get there. That's awesome. And I love the
Yeah.
story. I remember when I was visiting with you, you were explaining it to me, and what I love about it is that there's a whole other dimension when you talk about the kanji. Like we
Mm-hmm.
have names and symbolism for sure, but the way that they're written, they're all pretty much in the Roman characters. And then when you add the layer of artistic expression in the kanji and how that even reflects the personality potentially of the child or qualities
Mm-hmm.
about when they're born, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's really unique. I like that. Very fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, well, if I may share a
Yeah.
little bit about the naming of our oldest, it also connects with another language.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, when I first got married to Katie, I still had a year left of seminary, and I was studying Hebrew quite a bit at the time. My focus as a biblical studies person getting the master's was in Old Testament literature. And so I did a lot with Hebrew language study. And um, so some of the names that we were looking at were Hebrew names. I have a Hebrew based name, Jacob. And one of my good friends from childhood was named Joseph. And so I really like that name. And I was talking with Katie about that, and she liked we definitely had a baby name book, and we were looking at different options. And there was another Old Testament name that's a little less common that we were thinking of at the time called Joram. But then we ended up really zeroing in on Micah. And Micah has a really unique meaning. It can be broken into three parts. The first part, my, or pronounced in the Hebrew, it's me. It means who. And then the center of the name, the k sound in Hebrew, can be used for the term like. So who is like? And then the ending, the is a shortened form of the name for God, Yahweh, which means the Lord. So sometimes the name in Hebrew is written Micaiah. That's the longer form. Who is like, and then the ayah is more, you can see, similar to Yahweh, but it can also be shortened to just Micah or Micah in Hebrew. And so who is like the Lord? And so it's the name itself is kind of an expression of praise or of wonder, of exaltation or appreciation of God. And so we really liked that meaning. We liked how it sounded. And so we were like, okay, we have the first name, and what can we do now to think about family and honoring family? Because we did want to do something that would connect with one of our relatives, is to show that connection. And so my dad had a middle name, Blaine, and he actually had that name to honor a relative he had on his mother's side of the family. So I believe, if I have it right, that Blaine comes from his grandmother on his mom's side. That was maybe perhaps a middle name or a first name for her, Blaine. And so to honor my dad, who was honoring his grandma, we chose Blaine as Micah's middle name. It's a little bit different spelling. My dad's was Blain, and then our Micah is Blane, but it was still that same name that we wanted. So that was the kind of process that we went through. We did share with our family our ideas, and they seemed to appreciate them. And so, that's how we came to name our first. So, yeah.
Does Blaine have any kind of concrete meaning to it, or is it just kind of a family name? Or
it probably does, but I've only just known it as a family name, a sense of connection to family. But I'll have to look that up because I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. Yeah. Would you like to share a little bit now about your second?
Yes, right. Yeah. So with Yuma, I kind of thought that maybe there was a missed opportunity. I wanted to realize later, I thought, oh, maybe Aden would be a really good name, which of course kind of sounds like Alan. But when you write the kanji for it, it's like to have and compassion. And I really, really liked it. And the kanji for compassion is very complicated, but kind of in a really beautiful way. But it was not approved.
Oh no!
Because the thinking, and I can understand the thinking, is that Aden is already similar to kind of a Western sounding name, and so if we're giving him a middle name, then he would kind of have two Western sounding names. And I said, well, why not make the middle name sound like a Japanese name? But it wasn't still. So it was my last effort. So we were really focusing on names that would be easy to pronounce for my family. And so we ended up with Dewey. And then the kanji was very difficult to choose. So a little bit more input from the family. Ayako's sister has a friend who kind of studies names and whatnot. And she said that if the kanji on the left side, so some kanjis are made up of parts of usually other kanjis. So like you can have a normal kanji that becomes a small kanji and then add it to other kanjis.
Interesting.
Yeah, to become part of a whole. And so if the younger child, according to the friend, has the kanji for king in his or her name, it's a bad idea because they will try to usurp the older child, and you'll just have conflict.
Interesting.
From this battle for supremacy within the family.
Wow.
Not that we don't already, but so we needed to find a do that doesn't have the king on it, because most of the do kanjis do have the king attached to the side. And we found one that it can mean like I guess kind of like to keep. In one way, it can mean to keep, but it also means kind of like to travel in a way. Like the word that we use for someone who studies abroad has this first kanji in it, and this new kanji in it. And then we were really having trouble with the second part, the E part. We narrowed it down to two. One of them really didn't have any meaning. It was just, well, I mean, kind of, but it's just the, it's only used for longitude, for the word for longitude. That's the only time you see this kanji. And it's interesting, right? Because it deals with travel, and it looks very nice. But we decided to go with the kanji that is used in kind of revolution, as like for changing governments.
Okay.
So like it's used in when they talk about the Meiji Revolution is when
Oh.
it's used in that case. So we may have inadvertently set up this this conflict through those means. So just instead of trying to overthrow the monarchy, we're just trying to overthrow the government. Maybe
Oh my goodness, that's so
it
funny.
just dawns on me now, right? 2 years later.
Oh,
So
oh
that may
my.
have been a misstep, but nobody was telling us not to choose that kanji, right? So we really relied on our families so much for these names that was something slipped through. But so I felt like we with Yuma we put so much emphasis on the first name and the meaning, and with Dewey we really liked the sound, and I felt like most of the emphasis was on the middle name, which was Silas. I always really admired Silas in the Bible. The way that he is spoken about is just so admirable. And Ayako said, for her opinion, she wanted kind of like a smooth, breezy sounding name. And with the S's and Silas, it kind of has that nice flow. So she approved that. She liked that. And yeah, it just so happened maybe because Silas kind of looks a little bit more like me, or maybe just because he's second child, we really tend to call him Sai. Kind of like, we just write it to each other, CY. And then with him, we call him Sai Sai. And he calls himself Sai Sai.
Oh.
Even though his grandparents call him Dewey, and other people call him Dewey, but he really has gotten attached to that too. And yeah, and so it's nice because I mean, I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I like baseball, and so it's kind of nice to kind of sneak in there that little Cy reference for Cy Young.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice, nice.
and yeah, and I thought even when he was very small, he really liked toys quickly, and I thought, I wonder if he'll be pretty sporty, and he does really like to he really likes to throw things. Um,
Ah.
so we'll see. But yeah, it's really nice to the way that coming up with his name went, and that Silas has been kind of really picked up by the people in our family, and of course there's the Barnabas and Silas connection as well, and yeah, and I'll save this for later, talking about maybe we can talk a little bit more about names when talk a little bit about Alan and
Mm.
the idea of compassion and how it's seen in
I would
both of
love
our
that.
cultures. Yeah, but
Yes.
first, we if we had, I was so hoping we could have a girl because I wanted to use the name Tirsa.
Mm.
I really like Ben-Hur, and one of the characters is Tirsa in the movie, but also in the Bible, there's the one person I think from maybe Manasseh, that family line, who he had 5 daughters, and one of them was named Tirsa. He didn't have any boys. And
Ah.
I looked, and Tirsa is also, I think, a city place back in the Old Testament. And I looked what it means, and it means um, she is my delight. And I thought it's just such a wonderful name. But we have not had the honor of naming girls. But you have, and I'm very curious about both of the names that you chose for your girls.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Uh, I'd love to talk about that. So for Aubrey, our second child, um, we we had so many boy names, and it's interesting. Like the list came quickly and easily, but for girl names, we had fewer,
Mm-hmm.
and we really liked names that had bees in them. We liked the name Bryn, and we
Mm-hmm.
liked there were variations on that name. Um, in a way, maybe it was also thinking of another family connection. Like my dad's first name is Bryce, and we like the BR the combination. So there's Bryn, Brianna, different variations with B and R that we were thinking of, but it didn't quite click as a first name. So we kind of held that as a second name, and we were trying different things out. And then we came in a name book to the name Aubrey. Now, for me, I have studied French before in high school and then in college. And so certain words sometimes jump out to me because they remind me of a French equivalent or something. And the name Aubrey jumped out to me because I saw two parts to it. The first part reminded me of the French word aube, which is the sunrise. And the second part, ri, reminded me of the French verb rire or sourire, to smile or to laugh. And so I thought, oh, isn't that interesting, that combination of the sunrise, smile, the sun smiling as it rises in the morning, or this sense of joy and beauty. But evidently the etymology of the name Aubrey, at least how they're presenting it in the baby book, it was like a Gaelic term, and it meant kind of like something like Queen of the Elves or something like that, Elven Queen or something. And we thought, oh, that's interesting. I mean, we weren't going for a Lord of the Rings reference or anything like that. I guess probably for me, I just thought, well, I'll take it according to the etymology. I'm thinking we actually did change the spelling. We used an IE spelling, which actually is sometimes you see it with an EY spelling at the end, more commonly probably in the US, but we went with the IE spelling, which was more of a French spelling. And so kind of holding to that meaning that I had, that had connected with me, at least in my mind. So Aubrey Bryn was what we arrived at in our families liked it, and it seems to have fit. It's interesting. You select a name, and then as your child grows up, you can maybe find ways that the name connects with things they do or who they emerge into being. And when I look at Aubrey, she loves art, and she likes culture, and she actually at one point wanted to learn French. And so there are just different ways in which I felt like her name she felt like an Aubrey to me on a deeper level than just this happens to be the name we chose for you. And interestingly enough, with our third child, it's a different story than with our previous two. And this is a case where I will say that family played a large role in the naming. We had narrowed it down to several names, and we mentioned them to my mom. And this was in a season in her life where she was going through a lot of health challenges. She was kind of in the final stages of metastatic breast cancer. And it was unlikely that she was going to live to see this child. And so this baby, and she really wanted to. And so we told her, well, these are some of the names we're thinking of. And one of the names we mentioned is Hannah, which is another Hebrew name. And it kind of is connected with the root word in Hebrew for favor or grace. So we told my mom, these are the names we're thinking of. And so she shook her head. She said, oh, okay. And she said, I'd like to say a prayer for Katie, as she's in this period before giving birth, and is just anticipating this, that just God would provide for her through this. So she said this beautiful prayer. She put her hands on Katie and prayed for her. And then during the prayer, and she said, and now I'd like to pray for baby Hannah. And she went on to say this beautiful blessing over this little baby that Katie was carrying. And after that prayer, we went for a walk, and we're like, well, I guess her name's Hannah now. and it felt right, and it was in that we might have come to that eventually, but that moment was so special. And we're like, well, of course, this is her name, and that's how she was named. So in the case of our third, it was my mom really who named her after we shared some of our thoughts, and we loved it. And the interesting thing, oh, you know what, Barney, I can't believe I said this. I got my middle names mixed up. Hannah's name is Hannah Bryn. Aubrey's middle name is Pamela. I'm so sorry. Let me straighten this out. So we held the Bryn name, the middle name, until Hannah came along, and then that's where it entered the family. Aubrey's middle name was Pamela because both of our moms were Pamelas. And that was easy. I mean, that was like, okay, we have two people we really love and care for. We want to honor them. They have the same name. That was like the easiest decision of the whole process for all three kids, was that middle name for Aubrey. So yeah, so Micah Blaine, Aubrey Pamela, and Hannah Bryn. And each had their own dynamics, but that last one really did have a huge impact, I would say there was a huge role for my mother in selecting it. So, yeah. And maybe thinking about what you said about when we're considering names, we want to consider qualities that the names embody. I could think I mentioned Micah being a sense of exaltation, of praise to God, who is like the Lord, and Aubrey, this image of a sunrise and of smiling, and Hannah of grace and favor. I guess I kind of wonder, did you learn anything from the experience of naming your sons, or is there kind of, I think you said there might be some concepts just in looking at names that have stayed with you. I think you said, was it compassion is one of the concepts? Yeah. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. We it's when I first introduced Yuma's name at church, they when I went to church, and they said, did you decide on a name? And yes. And then they said, can you write it on the whiteboard so that we can see what it looks like? And I said, before we arrived at this name, I was really thinking about Aaron, and I said, have compassion, and everyone really nodded, like, wow, that would be a good name. But when I talked to other people, especially Ayako, even, and then just average Japanese people, when I mentioned that, they said their reaction was very different. Just, oh, why would you want to use that kanji? So it's so interesting how, from a Christian point of view, having compassion is just amazing. What a great quality to have. But from kind of the standard Japanese thought of compassion, of at least the compassion that this Aren, it's then the compassion part is then, or awaremi. And in at church, we hear people say awaremi, awaremi, awaremi all the time. But when you try to use it outside of church, people told me it has kind of the feeling of looking down on someone. Like I can give you my compassion because I'm in a position where, maybe I'm comfortable, or I have things that I can give away, or I have time that I can spare for you. So they saw it as looking at someone who is continually looking at other people who are needy, because they're lacking things, material things in their lives. But not so from the church standpoint. We all need compassion, right? And we all want to give compassion to other people. So I can understand why maybe it would have been tough for him to have that name. But I was a little bit sorry that we couldn't use such a name with such strong symbolism. But
that's really interesting. The different perceptions of a name based on the broader culture versus a subculture. And I would imagine the case would be the same too for some of the names of our children. Biblical names wouldn't have the same significance necessarily in broader American culture. And the name Micah or Hannah are common names. Aubrey less so, but both being biblical names, people probably just tend to think of it on the level of the sound of the name or the name, and not some deeper meaning religious meaning, but um, if you were to say to somebody, my name means who is like the Lord, and you're in a secular context, they may or may not have any appreciation of that or care, or, oh, okay. Or if you say, talk about grace or favor, like, oh, my name means grace or favor, or I guess grace and favor have a pretty general positive meaning and probably broader American culture. But yeah, but it's interesting to think of, something that in one context means so much, or it has a certain impact, and then you take it elsewhere and it doesn't. That's fascinating. Do you think that there is a form of compassion with a different kanji or a slightly different concept that gets at the idea of a sense of, like, I don't know if you want to call it like forgiveness, or more kind of care, like genuine care for another person that avoids the kind of what they see as a kind of patronizing or paternalistic, or deigning to help someone, like a charitable kind of thing that's flows out of a person's superior status, but more like that's more of an on equal footing. Like, have you heard any terms like that, or is that concept not quite expressed in that way in Japanese culture?
I think that I don't think that it would be used in names, but I think just in general, just the kanji for helping, for help, either asking for help or helping someone. I think then that's what they would use in that kind of situation.
Okay. I see. So there is a concept that is maybe more neutral from, in a popular sense, for people, that feels less like I'm receiving something from a greater party, or yeah. Well, do you have a sense of naming as, I guess I want to say, bestowing a certain identity on the child? Is it stronger in, maybe it's hard to make a blanket statement like that, but is it stronger in Japan than in the US? Like, when you give a name, you really expect it to impact somehow the child's personality, or is it not quite that? Or
yeah, that's a great point. And so I can think of a few examples. The one person I used to teach with, his father was very studious, and actually was kind of worked in the government post World War II, with translating and things like that. And so he wanted his son to be studious, and so he gave him one of the kanjis for his name is about letters, like, I'm a doctor of letters, something like that. And so he and then he actually ended up being a newspaper reporter. And for his oldest child, he wanted him to kind of live abroad or study abroad, or travel, have an impact outside of Japan. And he gave him one of the kanjis for like being overseas, or being away. And it actually ended up that this son doesn't want to go overseas. He actually had the chance in his job to live abroad, and he actually changed his job because he didn't want to.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's interesting. So in one case, it ended up working well, and then another, it didn't. Interesting.
No. Yeah.
Well, I feel like maybe that happens in the US on some rare occasions, but the only time I hear people having reservations about using this name or that is if it has some sound or combination with the last name that people think it could, somebody could be made fun of for, or something, like if the first name rhymes with the last name, or people. But I don't tend to hear people say, oh, we have to pick this name or not pick this name because it translates to the child's identity. It's just I typically don't encounter that or don't have that sense as much. But it's interesting to think of cultures that do have more of a sense of that. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And for the child, if you grow up in that environment, maybe to aspire to embody things that are in your name, perhaps even. I don't know. I'm wondering if that's the case or not.
Yeah. I wonder too, or maybe even kind of resist. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to touch on as it relates to naming of children today?
Yeah, I think that as in talking about this together makes me realize how kind of interesting people who are Christians in Japan, how their parents kind of intentionally named them in certain ways. I can think of two pastors in Japan, and one pastor, his name is Aisaku, like Isaac, but the kanji for his name is a little bit feminine because it uses love and to make, like to produce love. And usually, if someone has love in their name, they would be a girl for sure. And so his parents really made a wonderful statement. Of course, they wanted to use the name Isaac, which has a great meaning. And then kind of the kanji that they chose for his name is very great too. And I'm sure that he probably had maybe a rough time, in school, but he's doing wonderful things now. And other pastor that is at a different church, his name is Da and Bide, so Da Bide, which in the Japanese Bible they write it as Da Bide. And it's these interesting ways of taking kanji and maybe reading them slightly differently. You can, you as a parent, you have the right to come up with your own reading of a kanji. So even if there's a kanji that 100% of the time is read as ma, you can say, no, I want it to be read as u or something. And so you can decide that, but maybe people can't read it. But for Dabide, in his case for Dabide, you can get Dabide I see. But these Dabide and Aisaku are names that you don't ever see or hear read in that way. But it's making a wonderful statement that their parents did. And I think, Kimiaki Sensei, for all three of his kids, he intentionally chose the names that he chose for a reason. And his oldest son, Tatsuki, his first son, Nobu. I hope that's his first son. I hope it's not second son. His first son, Nobu, he chose a different reading of faith, the kanji for faith, and to kind of give it a more masculine sound to it. And it's great to see how people are, kind of identifying themselves, setting themselves a little bit apart, being, what was it Peter said, to be a little bit unusual, maybe as Christians, and taking that and using it in names. So I really like that.
Wow, that's a really good point. I like that your name itself can be an expression of your faith, your witness, even just inherent in its uniqueness. And that's fascinating. And I think I remember before when we talked about our sister church relationship that that some of the other names of Kimiaki's children, I think we talked about them were biblical concepts like Anzu. Is that love, or what was Anzu?
Anzu's name is apricot.
Oh, apricot. Okay.
Right.
Okay. That's right. But one of the other daughters, did she have a I?
The first girl, first daughter, and then that is love.
Okay, that's right. And what does Kai mean again?
Open.
Open.
And
okay.
I think it was from Revelation. I think, is where
Okay.
he said it was taken from.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So,
Mhm.
um, openness and love and apricot. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I think that he was saying, like, there's a certain part in the Bible that the Japanese version, like, it talks about this maybe.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Right, right,
interesting.
right. Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Uh, well, this has been really interesting and meaningful, and I'm hoping that people who are listening have learned some things about Japanese culture, maybe even reflected on American culture a bit, or your own experiences with
Mhm.
naming children or being named. Um, and I carry it with me as part of my faith. So, yeah.
That is just a fantastic story in so many ways. And we want to thank you all for joining us and taking your time to listen to what we wanted to talk about, these topics that are very dear to us for our children and for ourselves. And we hope that you have found some reflection on your own name, and maybe the names that you know of the people around you as well, and maybe the names that you think you might like to be able to use in one way or another in your future. And we just really appreciate that you take the time to listen. And we hope that you are looking forward to our next episode, as we most certainly are as well.